Conflict. It's something every good story is supposed to have. American Ultra is a 2015 comedy drama action film directed by Nima Nourizadeh, written by screenwriter Max Landis, and starring Jesse Eisenberg and Kristen Stewart. The film is about Jesse Eisenberg being a deadbeat stoner and finding out that he's actually a CIA brainwashed drone who can kick ass and is forced to escape being assassinated by the government along with his girlfriend, who is played by Kristen Stewart. In regards to conflict, the most interesting thing I find about American Ultra is not the conflict contained within the film's plot, but rather the conflict it's generated amongst critics and within my own mind. Now for some context. A couple months ago, I watched the episode of Red Letter Media's Best of the Worst, which was co-hosted by American Ultra's screenwriter, Max Landis. I highly recommend that episode. It's fantastic, I had a great time, and it made me want to check out the film work that Max Landis has done. Fast forward to the near present, and I decided to watch his film, American Ultra. I went into the film with no knowledge of the plot, I barely knew its genre, and had no expectations for how good it was going to be. I watched the movie, and I thought it was great. Now, here's the conflict. Immediately after watching the film, as I tend to do, I looked up its Wikipedia page for some bonus information. What I found out was that the reason why I had not heard of this film before, despite it only being a year old as of my viewing, was because it was a flop financially as well as critically. The same film I just watched and thoroughly enjoyed my time with didn't even make back its smaller budget and also holds a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes. This situation is a bit disparaging for myself, knowing that something I like isn't mutually appreciated by the general public, but oh well, it happens. More context. I see written towards the end of the film's Wikipedia article that the screenwriter, Max Landis, discussed the film's poor performance with Red Letter Media in a video interview. So, after a quick search, I found and watched the interview that Red Letter Media held with Landis. I would recommend that anyone who is a fan of film and finds the industry fascinating, please watch this interview. The interview doesn't really focus on one thing and hardly mentions American Ultra, but it's thoroughly enchanting to hear an insider's opinion of this monolithic industry that's always being criticized for how shitty it is. I'll link to the interview in the description. One of the first things I realized while watching this interview is that the Best of the Worst episode that turned me on to Max Landis was originally orchestrated because Red Letter Media had made a negative review of American Ultra in episode 94 of Half in the Bag. I then moved on to watch their video review of American Ultra, and yeah, they had very little positive to say about this film I enjoyed. Okay, so enough context. Back to conflict. The conflict I have surrounding this film is that it's polarizing to its critics, but with a slight weight on the negative side. Even further, it's not a big or important film, it's certainly not consequential to the film industry or to art as a whole. Hell, it's only 1 year later and this movie's already faded into obscurity. This film isn't something worth much of my or most other people's time, but here I am making a video about it. I enjoyed this movie, and I feel that if more people went and saw it, then more people would enjoy it just like I did. Okay, so this is the analysis part you read about in the video's title. So what's my in-depth verdict on American Ultra? Well, if you were to ask me fresh after my first viewing of the film, before I had read any of its criticism, I would have told you that I loved it. Now, when I say love, I'm not talking like 9 or 10 out of 10 territory here, but I could stand for a few dozen more Rotten Tomato percentage points being added to the score. So far, my analysis is starting to sound like the out-of-context reviews on the Wikipedia page. You know that stupid reception section where everything's really vague and never really actually tells you why a movie's good or bad? It's a bad movie because it's bad. If you can harken back to what I said the film is about at the beginning of this video, it's about stoner Jesse Eisenberg finding out he's a badass and evades the CIA mob with his girlfriend/handler Kristen Stewart. Well, what genre of movie is it? Going back to that Wikipedia page, it's described as an action comedy film. I would say they left out a whole genre, drama. Now, I'm not going to be the first one suggesting we call American Ultra a dramedy action film, but it legitimately contains strong elements from all three genres. I would even say it's more of a drama than a comedy, though it has that very wry and dry type of comedy that can be easily mistaken for drama if you're not in on the joke. This also works in a warped kind of way, where the film's drama could easily be mistaken for shitty drama if you're not in on the joke. I think that this is the biggest reason people who say they don't like American Ultra don't like it. The comedy hits in odd and disjointed ways, so if you're unlike me and is someone that doesn't have an odd or disjointed sense of humor, then you probably won't laugh at this film at all. Instead of more rambling, here's a hard example, and one that was brought up in the Red Letter Media review of this film. Spoilers. Towards the end of the film, CIA people are brought into the woods while it's raining and knelt down for a potential execution. Jay from Red Letter Media brought up the obvious cinema reference a scene like this evokes, and that's the Coen brothers film Miller's Crossing. But as I knew when I was first watching American Ultra, that Miller's Crossing was not the film I was watching. But here we are, in the woods with loaded weapons, it's raining, and blood's about to get spilled. But in American Ultra, these characters aren't gangsters. They're CIA agents. You know, beholders of the law and a paragon for good and justice. And they're behaving like the mob? Ah, yes. This is the joke. It's funny that the CIA behave like the mob in this movie, at least to me. And speaking of me, yes, I'll admit that I laughed out loud more than once during my viewing of this film. Going back to discuss the film's genre, its genre is one of its pitfalls. I'm not a screenwriter nor a filmmaker, but everything I've ever read about pitching films has to do with marketability. The easier it is to sum up your movie into one clean and tight sentence, the better. Better for you, the pitcher, better for the executives, better for marketing, and better for potential filmgoers. American Ultra is a hard sell, and not in the same way Star Wars was back in the 70s. The film's title doesn't say what it's about. It combines 3 different genres together, as well as elements of stoner comedy and spy films. When trying to briefly describe this film for the sake of this video, it was kind of hard to do in a way that accurately describes what the film is truly about. This is a fundamental problem that had a hand in killing this film's popularity before it even went into production. And speaking of the CIA mob, the primary villain of this film, played by Topher Grace, acts like a goddamn silly stupid crazy person in this film. Another legitimate issue with this movie relies on how the main CIA characters move around and act within its plot. Topher Grace plays like a paramilitary warlord type character, with complete control to do some reckless and awfully convenient stuff. And I mean convenient in the sense that it's convenient that this crazy person has this much power at the start of the film, because if he didn't have all that power and all that crazy, then nothing would have happened in this film otherwise. Topher's craziness is the inciting incident to this film's monomyth. And the same falls on Connie Britton's character, who's like the CIA opposite to Topher. She's older and a woman, so she's his opposite. Yeah. She tries to help Jesse Eisenberg throughout the film, and is about as reckless and unrealistic as Topher's character, just less powerful. Here lies another legitimate problem with this film. When its premise relies on a certain level of suspension of disbelief, and the part I'm questioning most is the film's important characters' motivations and actions. If I'm asking why the thing that's pushing the plot along during a movie is doing what it is, then something's not right. Okay, one more problem with the film. Too much is explained off camera. Throughout the film, a lot of important character stuff is told through expository dialogue between characters. Oh man, Jesse Eisenberg, you've been sleeping in the big house every night since you've been old enough to fuck. Oh, Jesse Eisenberg, didn't you know your girlfriend has loved you the whole time? Didn't you know that? Okay, film, that's nice and all, but where's the proof? I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the basic storytelling concept of show don't tell. This is crazy important for films over other storytelling media, since we're actually able to see what's happening. When important information that's supposed to help suspend my disbelief or enforce character establishment, and it's just said and not shown, I start to doubt the legitimacy of your storytelling, and the world of the story just feels that much less real.
Wow, man, I thought you said you liked this movie. All you've done is agree with the very people you called out as contrary to your own opinion.
Yeah. While I still think, despite all its flaws, American Ultra is well worth the recommendation. If I'd even known about its existence in August of 2015, I would have been fine paying money to go see it in the theaters. I wouldn't have complained about the film or asked for my money back. It's got a quirky and dry sense of humor, and even though the villains and the CIA aspect of the film is ridiculous, I still think it's enjoyable to see it all play out. The action feels low budget compared to other films, but it has a nice sense of honesty over reality. I thought it was refreshing to see Jesse Eisenberg and Kristen Stewart in their roles, and I thought the romance was better than other films some of them have been in. I thought Jesse Eisenberg's character pulled off a good combination of slacker and reckless. Kristen Stewart acted more emotional than we usually get to see out of her, and frankly, it just seemed like I was watching a mystical creature flaunt in front of me, her acting like a more or less normal person. The way she looked and acted in the film isn't terribly different from people I know in real life. One of the main reasons why I'm here making this video on this film is because I think I identify with it in some weird way. Here is this film with a silly premise made on a somewhat modest budget with actual actors and written by a screenwriter with a public presence, which is something pretty darn rare for most screenwriters. I sympathize with this movie on those bases alone and would watch it just to support it, but no one else did or cared about it, at all. And because of that, a lot of people don't even know this movie exists. I don't know, it just seems kind of unfair, and I can see where Max Landis' angry tweets come from. Sure, this movie wasn't going to break any box office records, nor was it going to win any Oscars, but it's good for some laughs, some legitimate drama, and some decent action. Shouldn't that at least warrant a break even at the box office? Some kind of cult following status? I guess not. This film represents a lot of the film industry's harshness. In many ways, this film was a dead man walking from the start. As I already stated, it's simply not a very marketable film based on its premise and genre alone, let alone its unpopular casting, crew choices, and R rating. It shows how, if something doesn't hit the formula hard enough, it can wither and die and never be given a fair shake at any kind of limelight. And because of this, as Max Landis points out in the interview, it was beat out box office-wise by two films that hold a 13 and 8% on Rotten Tomatoes. No matter your opinions on American Ultra, if you can't at least agree that that's a big damn shame, then I guess post your thoughts in the comments, and I'll have to make another video reconciling my conflicting opinions in that regard.